a lilac designer gown in her magnificent Montecito mansion.
Welcome back to our channel, everyone, and if you are new here or if you've been hanging out with us for a while but just haven't hit that button yet, please remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support honestly means the world to us, and it helps keep this community going as we dive into the absolutely wild world of media, public perception, and the endless drama surrounding the royal family. Today, we need to sit down and have a serious but also slightly baffled conversation about something that has been unfolding right before our eyes, and honestly, it has reached a level that I think requires us to step back and ask some really fundamental questions about human behavior. We are talking about the sheer, unadulterated obsession that certain royal journalists have with Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Specifically, we need to look at the actions of Tom Sykes, a man whose entire professional output lately seems to revolve around writing against Meghan on a practically daily basis, attacking her non-stop, and yet he has just done something so incredibly telling that we just have to laugh, because if we don't laugh, we might actually start to worry about the state of modern journalism. I mean, let's just paint the picture here. Tom Sykes is currently flying into Zurich, Switzerland to watch Meghan's latest visit and speech. Just think about that for a second. Let it sink in. He's getting on a plane, packing his bags, dealing with airport security, and traveling to an entirely different country just to stalk, and let's call it what it is, a form of professional stalking, a woman whom he and his colleagues constantly claim is completely irrelevant. You truly cannot make this stuff up, can you? It is the ultimate paradox of modern royal reporting. I am telling you, even if we weren't talking about Meghan specifically, even if we were talking about any other public figure on the planet, these people keep her relevant by their own sheer, inescapable fixation. They are the ones fueling the very fire they claim to want extinguished. Imagine flying all the way to Switzerland to follow a woman you tell your readers every single day doesn't matter anymore, who has no power, who is a non-working royal, and who should just fade into obscurity. If she's so irrelevant, Tom, why are you checking your passport? Why are you booking a flight at short notice? It's hilarious, honestly, but it's also deeply, deeply bizarre. To add another layer of absolute irony to this whole situation, let's look at what happened just last week. Tom Sykes couldn't be bothered to fly to Italy last week to cover Catherine, the Princess of Wales, during her high-profile 3-day official visit. Now remember, he is supposed to be firmly on Team William and Kate. He's the guy who is constantly briefed by those mysterious sources, you know, the famous friend close to Prince William, who always seems to have a direct line to his ear whenever a new hit piece against Prince Harry and Meghan needs to be written. You would think, as a dedicated royal correspondent who champions the working royals, that a major 3-day trip to Italy by the future queen would be the absolute pinnacle of his weekly assignment sheet. But no, he stayed home. Italy wasn't worth the flight, apparently. Yet the moment Meghan specifies a date to give a speech in Switzerland, he drops everything, books a last-minute ticket, and rushes to Zurich. He knows his rabid followers will be sitting there, breathlessly awaiting updates on Meghan's every move, every outfit, every gesture, and every word, just so they can dissect it and find a new angle to criticize. These people are obsessed and completely beyond help, and the fact that he caters to this audience while pretending to be a serious, detached journalist is just a masterclass in hypocrisy. When you look at this behavior, you really have to wonder about the psychological diagnosis for this kind of fixation. What do we even call this? It's like a real-life manifestation of a parasocial relationship gone completely toxic, except it's coming from a professional reporter who is supposed to maintain some semblance of journalistic integrity. He's basically stalking Meghan, Sussex, yet his entire career relies on the narrative that she is a nobody who ruined everything and then became meaningless. The obsession by these royalist journalists, particularly the ones who are known to be incredibly close to the palace, is getting so intense that it's genuinely becoming scary to watch. It's no longer just about reporting the news or analyzing the monarchy as an institution. It has devolved into a personal, vindictive crusade that requires physical proximity. He has to be there in the room, or at least in the same city, to witness a non-working royal speak, all while ignoring the actual working royals he claims to respect. The math just isn't mathing, as they say, and it reveals a truth they desperately try to hide. They need her. They need her name, they need her face, and they need her existence to sustain their own livelihoods and platform. Let's take a step back and really analyze the ecosystem that creates a situation like this, because Tom Sykes is just one symptom of a much larger institutional habit. For years, the British media landscape has created a very specific narrative around the royal family, divided neatly into the heroes and the villains. On one side, you have these saintly, dutiful, flawless figures who can do no wrong, and on the other side, you have Harry and Meghan, who are blamed for everything from family rifts to global shifts in public sentiment. Because Sykes is so deeply embedded in the palace briefing culture, his articles naturally reflect the biases of his sources. When a friend close to Prince William drops a hint or a complaint, it gets transformed into a front-page story or a scathing opinion piece. This creates a cycle where the journalist becomes a mouthpiece for one faction of a family feud, losing all objectivity in the process. And when you become that emotionally and professionally invested in a narrative, you become trapped by it. You have to keep feeding the monster you created, which is why a trip to Switzerland becomes an absolute necessity for him, while an official royal visit to Italy is treated as an afterthought. The sheer dedication it takes to maintain this level of negativity is exhausting just to think about, isn't it? Imagine waking up every day and your primary goal is to find a new way to tear down a person who lives thousands of miles away, who has stepped back from official duties, and is simply trying to live her life and give speeches on topics she cares about. It must take an incredible amount of mental energy to sustain that level of animosity day in and day out. And the irony, of course, is that the very act of traveling to Zurich to cover her proves her immense cultural power. If Meghan were truly irrelevant, his editors wouldn't approve the travel expenses. If she were truly a fading memory, the public wouldn't care enough to justify a journalist flying across Europe at short notice. The travel budget alone tells you everything you need to know about who actually drives engagement, clicks, and revenue in the world of royal journalism. They can write all the headlines they want about how the public is tired of her, but their actions scream the exact opposite. They are hooked on the Sussex traffic, and they can't break the addiction. It also raises a lot of questions about the double standards within the royal press pack itself. We are always told that the media is just doing its job, providing accountability and reporting on public figures who occupy a unique space in society. But where is the accountability for the journalists themselves? Why is there no self-reflection among these reporters when they realize they are ignoring the actual work of the monarchy to chase a private citizen around Europe? If Catherine's visit to Italy was meant to showcase the soft power of the British state and the relevance of the modern royal family, then surely that should have been the priority for someone who aligns themselves with the palace. By choosing Zurich over Italy, Tom Sykes inadvertently signaled that Meghan's presence is more significant, more compelling, and more vital to his career than the very institutions he defends. It's a complete self-own, and it's honestly fascinating to watch them trip over their own narratives in real time. This behavior also highlights a very dark side of modern media consumption, where hatred and outrage are commodified to an extreme degree. The business model for many of these royal commentators relies on keeping their audience in a perpetual state of anger and resentment towards Harry and Meghan. Every speech, every charitable endeavor, every casual outing has to be framed as a calculated plot or a desperate bid for attention. To maintain this illusion, the journalists have to provide a constant stream of first-hand observations, which explains why Sykes felt the need to be physically present in Switzerland. He needs to see how she stands, how she speaks, who she talks to, so he can spin it into the next round of hit pieces for his followers, who are waiting with bated breath to join in the collective condemnation. It's a toxic feedback loop that rewards stalking-like behavior and elevates personal vendettas to the level of national news, creating an environment that is increasingly hostile and, quite frankly, detached from reality. When we consider the psychological aspect of this entire phenomenon, it becomes clear that this is no longer about professional duty, it's about control and projection. There's a palpable sense of frustration among these commentators that Harry and Meghan have refused to play by the rules dictated to them by the British press. By leaving the UK, establishing their own financial independence, and continuing to engage with global issues on their own terms, the Sussexes have shattered the illusion that the media holds ultimate power over their lives and destinies. For a journalist like Sykes, who is accustomed to the structured, controlled environment of palace briefings, Meghan's independent actions represent a defiance that cannot be tolerated. The constant attacks and the physical tracking are an attempt to reassert control, to drag her back into the narrative frame where she can be judged and penalized according to their standards. It is a desperate effort to prove that they still matter, even if it means exposing their own hypocrisy and obsession in the process. Ultimately, what this Switzerland trip proves beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Meghan remains an incredibly influential figure, whether her critics like it or not. The very people who wish for her downfall are the ones ensuring her permanence in the cultural conversation, because they simply cannot stop talking about her. Their careers, their platforms, and their relevance are inextricably linked to hers, and without her to criticize, they would have very little left to say to their audience. So, as we watch Tom Sykes file his reports from Zurich, filled with the usual complaints and manufactured outrages, we can look at it with a sense of clarity. We can see it for what it truly is, a confession of her enduring impact and a glaring demonstration of their own inescapable obsession. Let's dive deeper into the economics of this obsession, because if you follow the money, the entire illusion of Meghan's so-called irrelevance completely falls apart. Think about the budget meetings that happen behind the scenes at these media outlets. Editors don't just hand out corporate credit cards for international flights, hotel stays, and dining expenses in an expensive country like Switzerland on a whim. Every single expense has to be justified by projected return on investment. When Tom Sykes boards that plane to Zurich, it's because the data on the screen tells his bosses that Meghan means money. The clicks, the comments, the shares, and the ad revenue generated by a single negative piece about her will completely dwarf whatever engagement they would have gotten from standard coverage of a working royal in Italy. It's a corporate addiction to Sussex traffic. They have spent years building an audience that thrives on outrage, feeding them a daily diet of resentment, and now they are trapped by the very monster they created. If they stop writing about her, their traffic plummets, their numbers drop, and their advertisers look elsewhere. So when he claims she is a nobody, he is actively lying to his audience while his own travel itinerary proves she is their biggest asset. It is also incredibly telling to look at the sheer psychological projection happening within these palace-adjacent circles. For years, the narrative pushed by these specific reporters was that Harry and Meghan were desperate for the spotlight, that they couldn't survive without royal association, and that they were constantly engineering ways to stay in the news. Yet, look at who is doing the chasing here. Meghan is invited to Switzerland as a private citizen, a non-working royal, to give a speech at an event. She isn't holding a press conference for the British media pack, she isn't issuing royal notices, and she certainly didn't invite Tom Sykes to sit in the front row. She is simply moving forward with her life, engaging with global platforms on her own terms. It is the journalist who packs his bags at a moment's notice, flies across borders, and hovers in the background like a shadow. The roles have completely reversed, but the media will never admit it. The desperation isn't coming from California or Switzerland, it is flying in directly from London. It is a level of professional dependency that looks less like traditional journalism and more like an inability to let go of a subject that has chosen to walk away from their control. This brings us to the fascinating role of the mysterious palace sources that Sykes and his peers rely on so heavily. We've all seen the phrases, a source close to the Prince of Wales, or a palace insider, or a friend of the family. These leaks are rarely accidental. They're part of a highly coordinated public relations strategy designed to shape public perception. When a journalist is constantly fed negative angles about Harry and Meghan from someone allegedly close to Prince William, it serves a dual purpose. It protects the image of the working royals by creating a constant distraction, and it penalizes the Sussexes for choosing independence. But by becoming so dependent on these leaks, journalists like Sykes lose the ability to see the bigger picture. They become entirely co-opted by the internal politics of the institution they cover. This explains why he can comfortably ignore an official royal tour to Italy, an event that should be a priority for a royal correspondent, because his true value to his sources is his willingness to act as a weapon in an ongoing PR war. The moment he chooses to follow Meghan to Switzerland instead of supporting the institution at home, he reveals that his career is no longer about the monarchy itself, but about the conflict surrounding it. The psychological toll on the audience that consumes this content is another layer we really need to talk about. The readers who wait breathlessly for these updates aren't just looking for news, they're looking for validation of their pre-existing anger. By traveling to Zurich to provide eyewitness commentary on every micro-expression, every wardrobe choice, and every sentence uttered by the Duchess, Sykes is giving his followers the raw material they need to continue their online campaigns of hostility. It creates a deeply unhealthy feedback loop. The journalist provides the hyper-fixated coverage, the audience responds with outrage, the traffic spikes, and the journalist is rewarded with another assignment to follow her the next time she leaves her house. It's a cycle that completely detaches everyone involved from reality. In the real world, a person giving a speech at a conference in Switzerland is a standard, relatively quiet event. In the universe constructed by these reporters, it is treated as a major international incident requiring hands-on monitoring. It's a manufactured crisis designed to keep people angry, engaged, and clicking, and it shows a complete lack of regard for the real-world impact of this level of relentless scrutiny. Ultimately, this entire situation highlights the profound loss of control experienced by the traditional royal press pack. For decades, the rota system and the palace media ecosystem dictated exactly how royals were seen, what they could say, and how their lives were framed for the public. Harry and Meghan broke that mold entirely by stepping away and building a global platform that doesn't rely on the approval of British tabloids. They rendered the traditional royal press pack largely redundant to their lives. A trip to Switzerland by a reporter who openly dislikes her is a physical manifestation of that frustration. It's an attempt to force a traditional media presence onto a space where it is no longer wanted or required. They cannot control her schedule, they cannot control her message, and they cannot control her audience. So the only thing left to do is show up, watch from the sidelines, and write the same negative pieces they've been writing for years. It's a remarkably transparent display of helplessness masked as journalistic duty, and it proves that no matter how hard they try to write her out of relevance, they are the ones keeping her exactly at the center of the conversation. When you step back and look at the final destination of this entire media circus, you realize we are witnessing the complete collapse of traditional royal reporting into something that looks like an anxious round-the-clock stakeout. Tom Sykes, sitting in Zurich, frantically typing out updates about a woman he repeatedly tells his readers has no impact on the world, is the ultimate image of a modern-day paradox. It exposes the absolute limits of the palace public relations machine. For years, the strategy has been to isolate, ignore, and minimize the Sussexes, hoping that without the official royal machinery, without the balcony appearances, and without the royal patronages, their star would naturally fade. But this trip to Switzerland proves that the institutional power of the monarchy cannot dictate global public interest. Meghan has built an intrinsic, personal relevance that exists entirely outside the walls of Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace. The international community invites her, global audiences listen to her, and the British press, despite their loudest protests, simply cannot afford to look away. This brings us to the ultimate self-defeat embedded in this style of journalism. By prioritizing a hit piece in Switzerland over a state-adjacent visit to Italy, these royal commentators are actively undermining the very institution they claim to protect. They are telling the world in no uncertain terms that the modern working royals are less compelling than the family members who walked away. If a future queen's 3-day tour cannot command the presence of a leading royal correspondent, but a single single speech by a non-working royal can cause a last-minute dash to an international airport, then where does the true cultural weight lie? The press pack has become so consumed by their hostility, so driven by the immediate hit of outrage traffic, that they are blind to the long-term damage they are doing to the monarchy's prestige. They are inadvertently broadcasting a message that the institution's primary value now lies in its internal drama and its ongoing vendettas, rather than its duty, heritage, or public service. They are cheapening the brand they pretend to worship, all for the sake of keeping a personal grudge alive on the front pages. And let's be honest about the audience waiting back home for these articles. They are being fed a completely distorted reality, a manufactured narrative where every single action by Harry and Meghan is filtered through a lens of malice. If she smiles, she's performing. If she's serious, she's calculated. If she speaks, she's self-serving. It is a complete and total airtight system of bias where no positive outcome is ever allowed to exist. But the cracks in this system are becoming impossible to ignore. More and more people are looking at this behavior, looking at a reporter flying across Europe to watch a private citizen give a speech, and they are starting to ask the exact same questions we are asking today. The absurdity is becoming too loud to ignore. The mask of objective journalism has completely slipped, revealing a desperate reactive scramble for relevance by a press pack that realizes the world has moved on from the old rules of royal media control. So as this trip to Zurich wraps up and the inevitable wave of negative headlines hits the internet, we can look at the entire spectacle with a newfound sense of clarity. We don't need to be angered by the hit pieces because we now understand the absolute desperation that finances them. Tom Sykes didn't fly to Switzerland because Meghan is irrelevant. He flew there because she is the most relevant subject in his entire professional orbit. And without her, his pages would be empty and his comment sections silent. It is a complete and total validation of her global impact, delivered by the very people who wish it weren't true. Let's look at the absolute endgame of this dynamic, because this isn't a cycle that can continue forever without something major breaking. By turning royal reporting into a continuous, hyper-fixated stakeout, journalists like Tom Sykes have effectively painted themselves into a corner. They have created an audience that demands a daily dose of adrenaline, a specific group of followers who need to be fed increasingly extreme takes just to maintain their engagement. But what happens when the subject simply continues to ignore them? What happens when Meghan keeps turning up at international events, looking poised, speaking passionately, and completely bypassing the British media infrastructure? The contrast between the hysterical, breathless reporting flying out of Zurich and the calm, business-as-usual reality on the ground becomes so stark that even casual observers start to see through the illusion. The press pack is running on a treadmill of their own making, sprinting as fast as they can to generate outrage, while the world outside their specific bubble has simply moved on to more interesting, productive conversations. This frantic energy also exposes the massive internal crisis happening within legacy media platforms themselves. The traditional newspaper business model is struggling, print circulation is down across the board, and digital platforms are in a brutal zero-sum war for human attention. In that desperate economic environment, nuance, fairness, and actual investigative journalism are often the first things thrown out the window. It is infinitely cheaper and faster to send a single reporter to Switzerland to write a predetermined hit piece that guarantees millions of hate clicks than it is to invest in deep substantive reporting on complex institutional issues. Meghan has essentially become an involuntary subsidy for the British press. Her name is used to prop up failing metrics and meet traffic targets, acting as a financial safety net for outlets that would otherwise be struggling to justify their operational costs. When you realize that this relentless coverage is driven by a desperate scramble for economic survival, the facade of moral superiority and journalistic duty completely vanishes, leaving behind nothing but a raw commercial dependency. And it's also incredibly ironic to watch how this fixation completely distorts the actual purpose of a royal correspondent. Theoretically, these reporters are meant to document the history, the diplomatic impact, and the national role of the monarchy. They are supposed to be the chroniclers of an ancient institution navigating the modern world. Yet by letting an obsession with a non-working royal dictate their travel schedules and editorial priorities, they are reducing a centuries-old institution to the level of a localized reality TV feud. The palace officials who continue to brief these journalists, using them to launch subtle broadsides against the Sussexes, are making a massive tactical error. They are feeding a press corps that will eventually turn its insatiable appetite for drama back on the institution itself the moment the Sussex traffic dries up. It's a short-sighted strategy that mistakes temporary media compliance for genuine institutional security. So as we watch the dust settle on another heavily covered international visit, the true power dynamic becomes undeniably clear. The media didn't go to Switzerland to hold anyone accountable. They went because they simply couldn't afford to be left behind. Every single frantic tweet, every live blog update, and every manufactured column inch written by those who claim she doesn't matter is actually a testament to her undeniable, enduring impact. They are locked in a room of their own design, shouting into an echo chamber, while the rest of the world watches with a mix of amusement and exhaustion. Thank you all for coming on this journey with us today, for analyzing the mechanics behind the headlines, and for being the most thoughtful community on this platform. Make sure to hit subscribe, drop a like, share this video around, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Until next time, stay grounded, look past the spin, and take care of yourselves.